When I try to kick him, I just put halfway his feet in my face. And they stop there, I pose. They ask me, how is it?
For decades, Sammo Hung has been one of the most recognizable faces in Hong Kong cinema, a man whose career spans stunt work, choreography, directing, and acting across more than half a century. Yet whenever his name comes up alongside Bruce Lee's, audiences lean in a little closer, hungry for details about a friendship that helped shape the trajectory of martial arts film forever. Now, at 72 years old, Hung has opened up more candidly than ever before about what it was really like to know Bruce Lee, to work beside him, and to lose him far too soon. His reflections offer a rare, human glimpse into a relationship that has long been reduced to footnotes in martial arts history, and they remind us that behind the legend was a man who left a lasting imprint on everyone who crossed his path. To understand why Hung's words carry so much weight, it helps to look at where he came from. Born in Hong Kong in early 1952, Sammo Hung grew up surrounded by the film industry. His father worked as an actor with roots in Shanghai, and his mother was involved in wardrobe work on film sets, but it was his grandparents who truly raised him, both of them well-established figures in the local movie business. That environment meant Hung was practically destined for a life in front of or behind the camera. At just 9 years old, he enrolled in a demanding Peking Opera Academy in Hong Kong, where discipline was absolute and the training regimen combined martial arts, acrobatics, and performance into a single grueling curriculum. It was there, under a strict master, that he became part of a now famous group of young students who would go on to define action cinema for generations, a group that included a young Jackie Chan among its ranks. Hung's screen career began almost as soon as his training did, with small roles appearing while he was still a child. By his mid-teens, he was already working behind the scenes at a major studio, learning the mechanics of action choreography from seasoned professionals. His big break arrived in 1973, when he took on a role as a fighter opposite Bruce Lee, in what would become one of the most celebrated martial arts films ever made. That opportunity opened doors that had previously been closed to him, and from there Hung's career accelerated in ways few could have predicted. Throughout the following 2 decades, he built a reputation as a filmmaker who could blend hard-hitting action with genuine humor, directing and starring in a string of hits that combined breathtaking fight choreography with comedic timing rarely seen in the genre at the time. His path, however, was never entirely smooth. As a teenager still training at the Opera Academy, Hung suffered a serious leg injury during practice, one severe enough to keep him bedridden for a prolonged stretch. Rather than allow him to rest fully, his master reportedly pushed him to keep performing despite the pain, a demand that reflected just how unforgiving that era of training could be. During his recovery, unable to train the way he once had, Hung put on a significant amount of weight, a change that would go on to shape the kinds of roles offered to him for years afterward. Producers frequently cast him as villains or comic figures because of his larger frame, and rather than resist that typecasting, he leaned into it, using his physicality to create characters that felt distinct from the lean, conventional action hero mold. That formative period of his life was later dramatized on screen, giving audiences a glimpse of just how brutal his early training truly was. Even as Hung's star continued to rise through the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the entertainment landscape shifted beneath him. As Jackie Chan's international profile exploded, some of Hung's own projects began to underperform, both critically and commercially, and the once parallel careers of these two former schoolmates started to diverge. Despite this, Hung never stepped away from the industry. He continued acting, directing, and mentoring, adapting to an entertainment landscape that was rapidly changing around him. Financial setbacks followed as well, particularly after one of his production ventures lost the backing of a longtime studio partner, a blow that forced him to reassess his role within the business. Rather than retreat, he pivoted toward action choreography and behind-the-camera work, quietly influencing a new generation of filmmakers even as his own on-screen presence became less frequent. The 1990s brought a renewed wave of visibility when Hung starred in an American television series that introduced him to Western audiences on a scale he had never experienced before. Though he eventually parted ways with that project over creative disagreements, the exposure it provided helped keep his name relevant internationally. In more recent years, His involvement as an action choreographer on a major martial arts franchise reignited interest in his work, and he returned to directing after a long absence, later appearing in several well-received films that proved his skills had never diminished. Recognition followed in the form of lifetime achievement honors from international film festivals, cementing his status not just as a performer, but as a mentor who trained countless stunt performers and actors who went on to shape the genre themselves. Behind the professional accolades, Hung's personal life has had its share of turbulence. His first marriage, to a woman from Korea, began in the early 1970s and produced 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, before ending in divorce roughly 2 decades later. That separation coincided with one of the more difficult professional stretches of his career, a period when the pressures of a declining industry seemed to bleed into his home life. Not long after, he entered into a relationship with a former beauty pageant title holder who transitioned from modeling into acting, a professional partnership that eventually became a personal one as well. The two married in the mid-1990s and have remained together for decades since, weathering the same pressures that come with two public figures building both a career and a family simultaneously. Hung has spoken candidly about the toll his demanding schedule took on his relationship with his children, admitting that long hours on set often meant missing important moments in their lives. One of his sons eventually followed him into acting and martial arts, adding a layer of shared ambition and occasional friction to their relationship as father and son navigated similar professional terrain. Health challenges have also shaped this chapter of his life. In 2010, Hung underwent emergency heart surgery, a procedure linked to complications from years of an unhealthy lifestyle and the physical toll of decades in a punishing industry. That scare pushed him to reconsider not just his physical habits but his broader priorities, prompting a slower, more reflective approach to both his career and his relationships in the years that followed. To fully appreciate what Hung has to say about Bruce Lee, it is worth remembering just how extraordinary Lee's own path was. Born in San Francisco in November 1940 to a Cantonese opera performer and a mother of mixed heritage, Lee's family returned to Hong Kong shortly after his birth, where he was raised amid the same theatrical world that would later define much of his life. He appeared on screen before he could even walk, cast as a stand-in infant in a film when he was only a few months old, and went on to act in roughly 20 films as a child performer. Yet his early years were far from easy. His mixed background made him a target for bullying, both from peers and, later, from British students at the schools he attended, and that friction pushed him toward the streets, where he became involved in gang activity and frequent physical confrontations. One particularly serious incident, a rooftop confrontation with a rival group in the late 1950s, escalated to the point of police involvement, a moment that reportedly convinced his parents it was time for a drastic change. It was martial arts, specifically Wing Chun training under a revered instructor, that gave Lee's restless energy a productive outlet. He threw himself into training with an intensity that quickly set him apart, developing speed, precision, and discipline that would become his hallmark. But his instructor's more traditional students were not always welcoming of a mixed heritage practitioner, and that resistance only strengthened his resolve to seek out additional private instruction. Around the same time, he became a champion dancer, a pursuit that sharpened the footwork and coordination that would later serve his fighting style. Facing continued conflict with local authorities and rival groups, Lee's parents sent him to the United States in 1959, effectively starting his life over. He worked odd jobs while finishing high school, eventually enrolling at a university in Seattle to study philosophy while informally teaching martial arts on the side. By the mid-1960s, he had opened his own school, teaching a style built on his own interpretation of traditional forms, one that emphasized practicality over rigid tradition. That philosophy would eventually crystallize into the fighting system for which he remains best known, a system built on adaptability rather than fixed rules. His growing reputation brought him into contact with Hollywood figures who sought private lessons, and a landmark demonstration at an international karate championship in the mid-1960s cemented his status as one of the most exciting martial artists of his generation. That same period, however, brought conflict with more traditional practitioners who resented his willingness to teach outside long-standing cultural boundaries, culminating in a now legendary challenge match that only reinforced his belief that martial arts needed to evolve. Frustrated by the limited roles available to Asian actors in American film and television, Lee eventually took control of his own career, forming a production company that gave him creative authority he had long been denied. Through that venture, he wrote, directed, and starred in a film built around an unforgettable fight sequence against an American karate champion, a project that further established his global reputation. He was midway through another ambitious project when the opportunity arose to headline what would become the first major Hong Kong-American co-production, a film that would go on to define his legacy on a worldwide scale. Tragically, Lee never lived to see the full impact of that success. In July of 1973, at just 32 years old, he died suddenly after a severe reaction to medication, a loss that stunned fans and colleagues across the world. His unfinished project was eventually completed years later using a combination of archival footage, stunt doubles, and creative editing. And though the final result drew mixed reactions, it remains a poignant, if imperfect, final statement of his philosophy in motion. It was against this backdrop that Sammo Hung's connection to Bruce Lee took shape. The two crossed paths in the early 1970s on a film set where Hung was working as a stunt performer, and their meeting sparked what Hung has described as a friendly, almost playful rivalry. In one frequently recounted memory, Hung challenged Lee to prove the rumors about his speed were true, only to have Lee respond with a kick that stopped just short of his face before he could even react. Hung has called that moment a genuine eye-opener, an instant demonstration of just how far Lee's abilities exceeded ordinary expectation. Their professional relationship deepened further on the set of Enter the Dragon, where Hung played an opponent defeated in the film's opening sequence, an experience he has described as both humbling and deeply educational, one that shaped how he approached fight choreography for the rest of his career. What Hung emphasizes most, though, isn't the choreography or the speed, but the character behind it. He has repeatedly described Lee not simply as a colleague, but as a source of genuine inspiration, someone whose dedication to his craft left a lasting impression on everyone who worked alongside him. Lee's sudden death, Hung has said, left a void that was felt across the entire industry, not only as the loss of a friend, but as the loss of a collaborator whose creative potential still had so much further to go. Decades later, that sense of loss has clearly never fully faded, even as Hung has spent his own career trying to honor the standards Lee set, blending authenticity with innovation in a way that continues to influence new generations of performers who may never have seen Bruce Lee move, but who feel his influence in every frame Hung has helped shape since. Like, subscribe, and follow for more.